This session of the Board of Education with the consent agenda for April 4th, 2023 is called to order. Tonight's work session is to receive a report on the Master Arts Education Plan and review the latest MAP data. Before we get started, we do have a consent agenda item that we need to vote on this evening, and so we will now vote on the consent agenda. Ms. Bradshaw, have there been any changes to the consent agenda?
Ms. Powell? I'm sorry.
Ms. Powell, have there been any changes to the consent agenda? No changes. Where did it's here somewhere. All right, great. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent?
Second.
Director Constant moves and Vice Chair Holland seconds. And is there any board discussion on the consent agenda?
Chair Scott, can you hold on just one moment?
Absolutely.
Did it just start recording?
Good. Did you start recording?
It's not clear that we were actually live when
Okay.
we started, and I think it might make sense to just make sure we have the full.
Actually live.
Oh.
Recording in progress.
Thanks.
Okay, we're recording. Okay, then I'm just going to go back. We had a first and a second on the consent agenda. There were no changes to it. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, the board will now vote on resolutions 6684 through 6687. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And Student Representative May is not here at this moment, so any abstentions? Then the consent agenda is approved by a vote of 6-0. Sorry, I just making sure we had the right number of people.
Chair Scott, Chair Hill first and second.
Yes, sorry, Director Constant moved and Vice Chair Hollins second. And with that, we're going to move on to our work session topics. Superintendent Guerrero.
Good evening, Chair and Directors. Tonight's work session is focused on a couple of areas. As you know, annually we have an opportunity to update directors on our progress in the area of visual and performing arts. As you know, at the start of this administration's tenure, we're developing our community-driven vision after working on our multi-year strategic plan. A few areas that have been eminently important to us beyond our curricular instructional work, expansion of career technical education, but in particular, making sure that we addressed gaps in the pathways in opportunities that our students have to participate in arts education. So we tasked our visual and performing arts team of one at that time, to begin to develop a multi-year plan for making sure the visual and performing arts were thriving and available to our students. So there's been a lot of work happening to refine that plan. Fast forward a few years, we've expanded our capacity both centrally to provide direction and support to arts educators all over the city, all over the district. We're thankful to the arts tax, which makes elementary arts education possible. And we really have continued our equity lens in our work in this area by focusing on clusters of schools, making sure that we address the stories we heard from students and families around not having complete pathways. If you started an instrument in elementary, didn't have band in middle, and then you were behind in high school if they had a band program. So a lot of work has been done in those areas. I think observed it, had opportunities to see some wonderful performances over the years. We're excited about a big event coming up next week, which you're going to hear about. But I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Academic Officer, who's going to introduce a team who's been behind a lot of this work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good evening. Excited to have you all in this space, and just so excited for you all to hear about the wonderful work happening and the future planning. And so, of course, as Superintendent Guerrero mentioned, this is a long time coming after some pandemic pauses and then the group getting restarted. And so they're super excited to be before you this evening. So I'd love to turn it over to Kristen Brayson and have her introduce our team, starting with our Senior Director of Academic Programs.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, Dana Narenberg, Senior Director of Academic Programs, of which Visual and Performing Arts is one of our amazing teams.
Go ahead and let's go down.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eleanor LeClaire. I'm the Visual and Performing Arts Coordinator for Public Schools, aka the BizOps Specialist for GAPA.
Hi, I'm Francisco. I'm the Theater and Dance TOSA.
I'm Liazel, I'm the Program Administrator for Visual and Performing Arts.
Hi, I'm Laura Arthur. I am the K-12 Music TOSA.
And I'm Elizabeth Herrera Berry. I am your visual arts TOSA.
And we'll hear more about this as we go. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to read tonight because if we don't, we'll be here all night because I could talk about this all night long. I want to respect your time limits. And so please forgive me for needing to be on script for that so you guys can keep on time. But thank you, Board Chair Scott, Board Directors, and Superintendent Guerrero. We're so excited to be with you this evening to present, finally, the 2023 State of the Arts Report and the excited, long-awaiting unveiling of the PPS Master Arts Education Plan. My name is Kristen Grayson. I'm the Assistant Director for Visual and Performing Arts. I come to this position with 22 years of experience in PPS as a performing arts teacher. In May of 2012, I joined Central Office as a TOSA for Arts Education and to support the system-wide implementation of the arts tax. I'm a product of PPS and launched into my own performing arts career after strong quality arts education training at Jefferson High School. Go Demos! This evening, okay, why isn't it a beat? There we go. So this evening, our snapshot presentation will include a brief timeline of our arts education history, an overview of our arts tax responsibilities, a little bird's eye lens on the Master Arts Education Plan, and an introduction to our definition of an equitable, comprehensive, high-quality arts education from the student experience. We anticipate questions might arise during this process, so if you can save them until the end, we'll have some time for that. All right, we're going to get going on our timeline here. So this is super important in context to where we are now. As we turn the page to this timeline, it's worth noting that in 2014, it was unclear what the arts tax would look like in implementation beyond the FTE it provides. There was an intergovernmental agreement to unpack and several dictates that would need to be defined. In this graphic, you'll notice over time how the implementation has meant huge gains in equity and access for students. But how did we get here? Why did we even need a tax in the first place? So Oregon's educational funding and national priorities have dictated the status of arts education since the 1990s. Oregon Ballot Measure 5 measure, which effectively equalized and for PPS decreased the tax base available to fund schools. We all know about this, right? Mm-hmm. Coupled with No Child Left Behind, which focused educational initiatives and funding on very narrow lane of math and reading, PPS experienced dramatic defunding of arts education. By 2012, the year prior to the arts tax, and this is really important, there were only 19 FTE across 56 elementary schools. Since the commencement of the arts tax in 2013-14, we hired 77 teachers via the fund and began slowly expanding K-12 arts pathways and aligning courses to ensure we deliver on our commitment to the city with fidelity. And as you know, when Superintendent Guerrero arrived, he started noticing gaps and inequities in our system beyond the arts tax and charged the Office of Teaching and Learning with creating a strategic plan to align to PPS Reimagine and the board goals. By fall of 2020, we kicked off our first year of investments using SIA dollars and implemented programming in the Jefferson and Roosevelt clusters to ensure we had complete pathways in both visual and performing arts. The following year, we moved to McDaniel and Southeast Title I schools with the same goals. And the current year goals have ensured that 75% of our schools, K-5 schools, now offer pathways in both visual and performing arts. Additionally, we launched the MAPE right now. It's quite exciting to see those investments take shape and to witness program growth. One thing I didn't note is as a part of this year, we also added multiple pathways to graduation so both DART and Pioneer are in this portfolio pathway as well. So now that you've been grounded in the timeline of PPS Arts Ed. We're going to turn to the arts tax and our intergovernmental agreement so we can collectively witness the conditions that have been set up to ensure equity and access to a high quality arts education. So here you'll see just a laundry list of things. These are pulled out from the IGA. There's the obvious things that we do in an IGA where we need to provide annual reports. Specific in the sandwich of the middle, here's where the rubber hits the road with the MAPE. Aligning a course of study, K-12 is our responsibility. Maintaining articulated courses beyond K-5 to serve 6-12. Ensure that we provide high quality arts education, and folks need to define what does high quality arts education mean. Well, the MAPE made that possible. And then we ensure that we hire teachers to reflect our population. There's an arts tax oversight committee that reports to the city. They do a comprehensive report each year, and they ask us to create a state of the arts and turn it over to them and provide that report as well. So what you're getting tonight, the arts tax oversight committee will get as well. All right. It's important in the blue box. This is one that we get hammered on a little bit, which is K-5 arts education only funds FTE. It does not fund supplies, field trips, etc., anything else. It is pass-through money to hire teachers, and that is it. Which is one of the reasons why we needed a master arts education plan to really understand how we were going to define high quality, but also how we were going to make good on our promises to extend pathways beyond K-5. So our master arts education plan, it was really necessary for us to start this process. This is a framework to address inequities and implement large-scale change via 6 key goal areas. So what you'll see here in the left lower box, and it's kind of light, but you get to the 6 goals there, and this was outlined in your memo, so you probably have a sense of what this is. We're definitely focusing on policies and practices, curriculum instruction and assessment, professional learning for our VAPA educators, and capacity building, what our stakeholders and partnerships look like and how they engage in our schools, really ensuring that we're data informed in our decisions and practices, and then the big one, financial sustainability. How do we sustain this over time as we add? And then prioritizing some key system shifts. So one of the greatest things that came out of this framework that we started to build is that we had an arts education wheel that came about. And it has been the conversation piece in pretty much every room we've been in to ensure equity and access. Before we move to that, I just wanted to say you have an electronic version of the Master Arts Education Plan in your materials. You will get a hard copy of that. We're not unveiling it to the public until April 11th, at which time we'll have all the printed copies, and then you can have your versions and interact with it as you'd like and ask questions. So this is the Equitable Comprehensive High Quality Arts Education Wheel. Each of these 5 areas really were grounded in research and in our learning journeys across the nation. We tried to dive deep into what other districts were doing, especially districts that had already executed strategic plans in arts education, and learned from them what were the key system shifts that really made a difference and where were there maybe potholes along the way. This particular graphic was through some deep unpacking of the Harvard Project Zero Qualities of Quality in Arts Education. So first, as we go across this wheel, access and time is the first thing that we can provide students, and that's what we are doing. When I started off this presentation, 75% of our K-5 students are getting access to visual and performing arts, but everybody's getting access to at least one arts form. And that's true across K-12. So we're providing the access point, and we're going to develop that over time. But it's also important to note that it is about frequency. So we want to make sure that our students are getting access frequently over a given year to arts education. The second one is the materials, equipment, and supplies. We have to have those instructional resources in order to drive the curriculum. In arts education, we are supplies heavy. And everything we do, it can't be done without those things. And there was a time period where we didn't have any of that support centrally. and buildings were left to fundraise on their own. So we're starting to turn the corner on that, as you probably saw in your board memo. Sorry, going backwards. This one's really interesting, and we had a great time unpacking this. When we talk about what happens in the course in and of itself, when a kid sits down in the seat or is in the choir risers, right? What happens during that time period that's really special and teed up to the graduate portrait? So specifically here, we wanted to pull out inquisitive critical thinking with deep core knowledge. We felt like that was such an important one to really leverage because there was so much packed into an arts education bell-to-bell class that met these objectives that we felt like this was really important to point out. And this is the piece that drives our professional development with our educators. In our professional development, we want to ensure that these things are showing up within the curricula, within the time spent with students, so that students do have meaningful experiences and tasks. And then finally, authentic and functional spaces. That is definitely one that we continue to work on, and with modernization, we've been able to make some key strides in that area. And over time and implementation, we'll figure out what does this look like in classrooms that aren't set to be modernized. How do we help out arts education spaces that are maybe in a portable with no sync in their visual arts class, right? So those things over the timeline of the implementation are going to be studied, and recommendations will be made in that direction. And then finally, hopefully over time, if you've been around for a while, even not, this year we've brought back in live, in-person performances, and that's been really exciting to see. It is the cornerstone of our courses. The super learning objective for arts education is the culminating exhibition and performance, and it is such a beautiful thing to witness because you can actually see student learning. You can see that confidence that gets sparked in kids, and all of the incredible things we know that happen within that performing and exhibition space. So, I just wanted to do a quick conclusion before we move on. In the upcoming 5-year journey to implementation in the MAPE, it's clear that we are on a path towards success. Along the way, we will continue to cultivate PPS arts education to be an experience for students that's compelling and connected. An experience that is a catalyst for student success. Students will have voice and agency in their unique human story. They will deepen their understanding of culture and community, and they will engage in rigorous study and technical skill building. We are determined to ensure that all students leave the PPS learning environment feeling academically fulfilled, emotionally intelligent, civically engaged, and culturally aware through engagement in the arts. So that's what this plan is intended to do. That's what we should see living and breathing in our hallways in our schools. So before we start the question and answer, I want to acknowledge that the creation of the MAPE and support for arts education in PPS doesn't happen without a crew of committed, thoughtful, determined, and caring individuals who treat this work with great care. I'd like to first acknowledge music TOSA Laura Arthur, who has been on this MAPE journey since its early stages. Laura deserves appreciation for her loyalty and commitment to the process. As a comprehensive systems thinker, a lot of her brain work went into this work. VAPA coordinator Eleanor Leclerc has skillfully project managed the MAPE through the difficult time of COVID and brought it through the other side to get us to this launching place. Visual Arts TOSA Elizabeth Herrera Berry, Dance Theater TOSA Francisco Garcia, and VAPA Program Administrator Lee Ezell came on board after the MAPE was already written, but continue to contribute to some wicked critical thinking about implementation and keeping us student-centered. Words are not enough to express gratitude to this team for the legacy they are creating in the district for world-class arts education to take root. So here's the fun stuff. The Heart of Portland happens next Tuesday, April 11th. I don't know if Roseanne shared the calendar invite yet, but if not, we will. Obviously, we're doing a ribbon cutting on the MAPE. There's a beautiful video that's going with that to celebrate. There's thousands of people that show up to this event. It's pretty epic. We have about over 300 students showcasing some form of work in this event. We also are, for the first time, launching a middle school honor choir. We've had an elementary one, but we're doing middle school this year. And then we have our first ever Latinx affinity community choir. So we have engaged Latinx identifying choral students across the district, and we brought them together over a series of 6 to 8 weeks to rehearse and work with a world famous musician, Luz Mendoza. And that work is going to premiere at the event as well, and it's going to be a pretty special moment in time for our district. So we hope that you get to come.
So do the performances start at 6:30 or?
The 6:30 is opening comments, and then about 10 minutes after, we'll do the ribbon cutting, and then the elementary honor choir kicks us off.
So we'll miss the performances. Right? Because we have a meeting.
No, it got
Following?
canceled.
Okay. So
we can go.
4 to 8 got canceled?
Yes.
No, the 6. Great, got it.
We're
Perfect.
gonna go to this instead.
Yes. That's as it should be. Yes.
Yeah, but we're fun.
Thank you. Sorry, Kristen.
Oh, no, that's okay, that's okay. Any
I was
questions?
feeling a little gypped there.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, well, I'll ask one, and I didn't ask this ahead of time, so I
Sure.
completely understand if you don't have the answer. But of our total arts funding in the district, do we know the split between what comes from the arts tax versus what comes from our general fund or our school fund?
Yes, that is data that we can provide to you. We do have it broken down by that, so we can provide a glance of that.
I'd be interested just
And
to
we
get a
have,
sense of.
and SIA is in there as well, right? So
Right.
we've got SIA, arts tax, and general fund to kind of bake the arts education pie, if you will.
Yes, that's a good question. We're grateful for the arts tax. That covers a good percentage of our elementary offerings. But if you recall, our conversation in SIA around expanding well-rounded education as a theme gave us the opportunity to really sort of start closing some of those gaps. We didn't have any options. So yeah, it's been a multi-braided sort of funding streams,
Yeah.
going into this effort.
And one of the reasons I ask, and I thought this plan is amazing, right? It's incredibly detailed and well thought through. I was just, your timeline was really interesting to me, having graduated from what was Wilson at the time in 1991. Arts was a huge part of my experience. I will remind everyone, as I always do. We have the YouTube. Because it's out there.
Why don't you just reenact some of it for us now?
I can. I mean, there you go. But what was interesting? I didn't. What was interesting though was that you talked about Measure 5, and Measure 5 did not explicitly defund arts. It just defunded education in general.
Right.
And but it's an important distinction, right? Because as we're talking about going forward, and I look at this plan, and there's nothing in here that struck me as, it all looked amazing. But the thought I kept coming back to is how do we protect it in a funding environment of limited resources? And then I even say that, and I have to follow it up to say, well, protect it, except there are other priorities, and I say this as a former band geek, that are higher priority. Making sure our 3rd and 5th grade students, can read and write, is a higher priority, and yet we can't sacrifice this as well. So anyway, this is not well thought out, but I just kept thinking about the pie, and I kept thinking about a shrinking pie, and I kept thinking about dedicated resources. Arts tax are great because it's dedicated, maybe some of the SIA funding, as well. But in this environment where we're, sitting at 9.9 billion right now, and we're going to be looking at cuts, like where do we take those from? And so strategic plans are great. Funding them and is the real challenge. What I love about it, I'll spin. I keep laying out these pessimistic thoughts in my head. What I love about it is that it allows us to express that vision for the community, so that when we are talking about why additional funding is really important, it's to achieve something very concrete and very specific.
Yeah.
That's what I just I think that's an important conversation as we go through this is what are those priorities and how to.
Well, and before you talk, Director Johnson, I was going to say that it's important also for us to illuminate what are the corollary tethers that go to 3rd grade reading, that are a part of arts education, right? And we could say everything in education is corollary, but like how can we actually measure possibly in some sort of way the way the arts education lights up those other content areas? At the very least, brings kids to school.
Right.
You know,
Which
so,
is not easy to do these days.
exactly. Yeah, we've been doing work with Wit and Wisdom, trying to think about like how does arts integration happen within that context. So, you know, there are some opportunities for us to dream about how we be creative in a future that's restricted.
Other questions, comments, thoughts?
Um,
Sure.
I just want to say I'm really glad to see, you know, all the thinking you guys have been doing about your instructional resources. Because it seems like that's always been sort of a budget scramble, you know, on an annual basis. And it's always hard to find the money, but it doesn't really do you a lot of good to have a bunch of teachers who don't have what they need to provide the full experience for our students. Kind of like parks bonds, you pass these bonds for parks, but there's nothing for maintenance, so you can't even use them. You can't. So I was really happy to see that. And when you were talking about the pandemic, I was just going to share one of my strongest, most heartfelt memories and visuals from COVID is I was out working with one of our school's food pantries, and there was a student who was outside by his front door, and he was on Zoom. He was in about the 3rd grade. He had his little packet of paints, and he had his little, and I could hear the teacher on the computer, and he was like dutifully there painting as were his, and I just like said, this is a moment in time, you know, and I had seen it before when all those resources were delivered, like all these arts resources and stuff. It was so cool. So
That's awesome. That's so great.
Yeah, I'm really delighted. I also benefited from going to Jefferson High School my last 2 years of high school in a program that got $300,000 a year in funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. And I believe that arts is as important as reading. It's another literacy that is really important, musicality or just appreciation and visual arts are like another language.
Right.
And so I really appreciate the work that you've done to kind of knit these strands together. Also, for one that doesn't know, your arts tax is due by April 18th. You're over 18, you have to. So get it in early. We take early payment.
already done. And will you please keep us posted? This is the season of performances. So will you keep us posted about what's going on?
Yeah, we have a Google. Do you want to talk about what we have?
Oh, sure. We have an interactive calendar where teachers submit their events that you can find on our website. So there's all the details that teachers submit about what you'll be seeing and experiencing at each of those individual events.
And how about we'll send that link out to you. So
That
you
would
can
be great,
find it.
yeah.
Yeah, there's something going on almost every single day. There's at least 300 events a year in visual performing arts happening across our district.
So great.
Yeah, send invitations. I'd love to know.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention is sometimes we put all of this investment in, and I forgot to say on the script. So what did that mean over time? And one thing that we can really point to is in Roosevelt, when I first came on, there were only 2 music teachers in the Roosevelt cluster. Now there's a music teacher in every school in the Roosevelt cluster, and that's been happening for several years now. And you can see it in the Roosevelt band. You can see them growing. And
they qualified for state.
For the first time,
It's really
in
exciting.
decades, they qualified for OSA state level competition. So
They're
that's
rocking at the basketball games.
to me, that's the evidence of this momentum building that we're doing for students.
And we know that, you know, arts education, especially music, is part of what we've seen. Research points to it helps close the education gaps. So the fact that Roosevelt cluster had not had that, and now it does, is part of us living into our values of making sure that we're giving all of the supports to all of our students so that they can all be as successful as possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna be talking to Dr. Adams about this.
And I certainly appreciated Kristen ending the formal presentation with acknowledgement to her team. And I think it's also appropriate to acknowledge Kristen's leadership.
Yeah.
I think it's also evidence and a testament to having strong leadership for visual and performing arts. And so thank you to her and the team.
So I was going to wait till the end to pile on because unapologetically feeling like this is an area I had to champion as part of our work here at PPS. So hopefully the evidence is clear when you visit schools. Our kids have access to new trumpets, actual purchased sheet music, equipment. Kids who never had these opportunities have them now. I don't do a school visit without visiting whatever art space or band practice is going on. I'm frequently at our concerts around the district, which is always a joy to see kids developing over time. But more importantly, Portland's built a reputation statewide, and we've been able to recruit some phenomenal arts teachers in all the disciplines. So my hat's off to the small but mighty team, because the one thing that consistently is mentioned by our VAPA teachers, the level of high quality support and service and guidance that they get from you all. So thank you for that. And I can't say enough about Kristen, of course, who, has just been the tip of the spear in all of this effort. So just want to appreciate the board's commitment to making sure there's always a little slice in there to take care of the arts just as much as we pay attention to some of the other areas, because for a lot of our kids, you're right, I mean, it's been a lifeline of engagement for them, and it's opened up doors to other areas and other opportunities. So I'm really glad that we've made this a priority for ourselves. So for those listening, if you haven't already, it's on our website. It's a link at the bottom of the staff memo. Take a look through that. I think pretty bold and ambitious Master Arts Plan. I think it sets a roadmap in the arts education disciplines for us. And I think if we stay true to it, I mean, we're already proud of our programming, but I don't think anybody's going to come close to what we're offering. So thank you for your work.
You're here. Thank you. How about one more accolade for when the stars aligned and you got a superintendent who was really dedicated to the arts.
Yeah. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Superintendent Guerrero coming on board. So much gratitude to you.
Director Board Member Jansen.
There's a comment. Sorry, we're at the wrap phase.
That's okay.
But I wanted to thank you and all of you, because unlike Andrew, my kids were in PPS at that moment in time, 2002, and there was almost nothing in their elementary school years in terms of art or music, and in middle school. And so to see what kids have access to now, it's incredible. And I think of there's almost like a little missing generation of kids who didn't have access to that. So thanks for the next generation having access to it, because each child, art unlocks something amazing in each child. My kids, I think, always thought they weren't very creative. I think just because they didn't have access to a lot of art or music on a regular basis. And so, like I say, until almost to the high school when it was just starting to layer in. So thanks for all the work you did to give the next generation the opportunity to find what makes them shine.
Thank you.
I have to say that Cleveland won like a arts excellence school in 21, and that was because of you advocating and putting that out there. And again, that's recognition. I know that was for that specific high school, but recognition for the district and the progress that your team has made.
Yeah.
And so I think because that happened during the pandemic, we didn't get to celebrate it as much, but again, that others are recognizing nationwide the incredible improvements and the incredible work that's happening at PPS in the field of arts.
Right. Are we going to see you guys next week?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we literally
Now that I know I don't have a meeting.
So we can come.
We canceled our board meeting. So
I think you'll be so delighted. It's just humming with just inspiration and sweetness. So it's going to be an incredible thing.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we can transition with a little bit of music. You found it.
I found it. Jazz by chance?
Is it
1990.
Is it an original? Oh my God.
All right, we'll play that later. I'm gonna make you all watch it at some point.
Is this actually you?
Yeah.
Really? You got it?
Yeah.
You got it?
Can you share the link?
Yeah, I'll send the link around. You don't need to do it. I mean, I'm not sure our watching audience needs to see it,
I
but
think they want the link too.
yeah, I'll send it around. Yeah, so you know I've been on the board too long that one of my stories are all the same. Every time we
Yeah.
talk about arts. So
Sorry I shut you down there.
no, that's okay. I mean, look, if it was really up to me, we would just play this. And listen to it. The transition to math data, which is equally important.
At least we're
Are
not.
you seriously playing your jazz band?
I was doing a little transition music just as we switch topics. Dr. Adams, please take us away.
Give you no respect?
What a great night. No, I was like, Baby Bear was here and, you know, it's just, that's famous. It's famous.
Famous was on the
Twitter-
Today Show.
Twitter famous. Twitter famous. Pleased to be with you tonight to share our math growth data from this year. I know some of you have been anxiously
Yes.
when we would have these data, so we're happy to go over them tonight. Dr. Armstrong will be chiming in at one point during the presentation, and so as you know, although there are lots of slides, I usually don't take lots of time to go through the presentation, so I just want to ask, as Ms. Person did, if you would hold your questions until after Dr. Armstrong has talked about our sort of reaction to the data, that would be great. Then we can have some rich and robust discussion. Okay, so these were our guiding questions. Okay, there it goes. We're examining tonight how does student growth now compare to student growth last year. Dr. Armstrong will talk about any adjustments that we might be making, and then also included in the last couple slides the demographics and participation rates of the students who were included in the data, for those who are curious about that. So let's begin with reading. Before we dive into the data, I wanted to offer some reminders about the MAP assessment. First, please remember that MAP is a norm reference test, so it wants its result to follow that normal bell curve. And that means on average, MAP expects 50% of students to make growth and 50% of students to not meet their growth targets. Therefore, 50% on the assessment is considered a good growth percentage. If we can push growth close to 60% or more, we're actually then shifting the distribution of growth, and more students are making growth than would be otherwise expected. And that also means that fewer students are losing ground because they did not make their growth targets. So let's dive into the data. On the screen is the overall reading growth percentages by grade level. The most recent years shown on the bottom in the darker shade of orange. As you can see, reading growth improved during the past year in grades 7 and 8, while all other years saw a decline in reading growth of between 2 and 4 percentage points. That said, it's important to note that with the exception of grade 6, growth remains above 50% for all grade levels in reading.
So it just means the rate of growth slowed. It's
The-
less than
the-
our previous period.
Right, the percentage of students who met their growth targets this year is slightly lower, but it is still at 50%, which is what we want at a minimum, is 50%.
More so than lower.
So
More so.
I'm trying to understand the math. So 50% is kind of, that's normed,
Mhm.
right in the middle of the bell curve, and so anything above that.
It's great, you're actually shifting the distribution,
You're
you're
shifting it
changing
onto
the
the-
shape of the curve.
Okay,
If we consistently have more greater than 50% of students meet their growth targets.
okay, and then also if it's going under 50%, then it's shifting it.
The other
Forward
way,
to the left.
yes, and more, because they're not meeting their growth targets, and we know we have many students who are behind, that would mean that more students are falling further if they're not meeting their growth targets year over year. Great question. In third grade reading growth, we can see that most student groups remain above 50% growth, with Asian student growth exceeding 60%. We also see that all student groups, with the exception of Asian students, demonstrated a decrease in growth or remained or held steady year over year. Decreases in reading growth are also noted in grade 4, with the exceptions of students who are multiracial and not underserved. These are students, as a reminder, who identify as both Asian and white. Native students also demonstrated an increase in growth, and this change should be interpreted with caution based on the small number of students who are represented. Also of note here is that our Black and Latino students among other groups had growth percentages that are lower than 50%. In grade 5, we see increased growth for white and Pacific Islander students, while special education students and multiracial students who are not underserved, their growth percentages held steady. While Black students' growth is still above 50%, there was a decline of 4 percentage points from last year, and we see a similar decline for Latino and Native American students. In grade 6, Asian students, Pacific Islander students, and both groups of multiracial students demonstrated increased growth, compared to last year. All other student groups showed declines in the percentage of students meeting their growth targets. In grade 7, we finally find some better news. Here, Black, Latino, multiracial, Asian, and white students all showed increased growth as compared to last year. Black students showed the largest gain at 14 percentage points, followed by Asian students with a 12 percentage point increase. That's some good
I think
news.
that's worthy of applause.
Which is pretty interesting considering challenges that our middle schools and our
Yes.
middle grades have experienced this year. That's pretty interesting. Says, I'd be interested, Dr. Armstrong, in your speculation about that too. I'll hold it till later.
Thank you. A little more good news in grade 8 reading. Here again, students of color are Black, Latino, Native, multiracial, underserved, Native, and Pacific Islander students all demonstrated increased growth this year. Now let's turn our attention to mathematics growth. Overall, in mathematics, growth remains above 50% in all grades except grade 6, and you'll note that grade 6 also wasn't at 50% in reading. Which is curious because that's sort of the first year, to your earlier point, in middle school. And is down in all grade levels compared to last year. The differences in the growth declines range from 1 percentage point in grade 3 to 7 percentage points in grade 6. Let's go grade by grade as we did before. In grade 3, overall growth is at 53%, which is a 1 percentage point difference from last year. For this grade level, all student groups except for white students demonstrated decreased growth compared to last year, with Black, Native, Pacific Islander students and English language learners all posting growth percentages lower than 50%. In grade 4 mathematics, the special education student group held steady in its growth percentages, while all other student groups showed a decline. Here, our Black students and Pacific Islander students demonstrated a growth percentage that is lower than 50%. As we move to grade 5, we can note that Asian students and multiracial students who are not underserved showed growth percentages that are over 60%, while 47% of Black and Native students met their growth targets. All other student groups achieved growth rates of at least 50%. In grade 6 mathematics, we see that only white students and multiracial students who are not underserved obtained growth percentages at or above 50%. All other student groups had growth percentages lower than 50%, and most saw declines in growth as compared to last year. As we move to grade 7, our English language learners, Asian students, and multiracial students who are not underserved showed increased growth as compared to last year. All our other student groups, however, showed a decline in growth percentages, with most students of color posting growth percentages that are less than 50%. Finally, in grade 8 mathematics, even though several student groups saw a decline in growth, all student groups, save Latino students, demonstrated growth percentages of at least 50%. Here, Pacific Islander and Asian students demonstrated growth percentages greater than 60%. And so you can see that our results have been fairly mixed.
Interesting.
Up next, if we just have one more slide. Up next is Dr. Armstrong, who is going to take a few moments to discuss our response to these data as we started unpacking them and understanding them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just a reminder, we tend to show this roadmap wherever we're talking about our instructional priorities because it captures those three elements. So curriculum adoption, instructional framework, and teacher professional learning. We believe is the roadmap to educational equity. And so really thinking, reflecting on the data, there's a couple of bullet points that I wanted to list out that's on the next slide. And that's just continuing implementing the interventions that we have going at the school level. So as we know, Matt testing the data from fall and winter, we started this year with the learning acceleration specialists. And so I think you have heard from several of us saying that we need time to be able to collect some data from how that intervention is going. And in our mid-year data collection, we're seeing some positive results in some of the schools. And if you recall that the target is on the students who are in the lowest quartile, and also our students who are Black and Native as well. We're continuing to review curriculum usage and instructional framework implementation. We've been collecting some data. I think you all have heard about our shift to a centrally supported site-based instructional coach model, making sure that our schools, our principals have the resources they need to localize the conversation on improvement and have conversations with teachers as that work continues. And so we believe that we're going to see even more significant gains with curriculum usage and not just because one can say, well, isn't everyone using the curriculum? I mean, that's our expectation, but we also expect that the curriculum is being used with fidelity too. So that's a part of it. And then enhancing student engagement. I think you all heard from the middle school redesign presentation that we are expecting to have more sites leaning into project-based learning and other experiences that draw interest from students, just increasing that, right? We know gone are the days for some of our students where, you just come and you read the book and you engage in learning and that's it, that it's interactive, that it's personal, that it's hands-on, and that it's collaborative. We do believe that will enhance student engagement. And then just the last piece is just that monitoring progress and adjusting as needed. We will continue to provide learning and coaching for teachers. As a matter of fact, our shift in our model will allow us to create those conversation opportunities that are a little more personalized and localized to that specific school community. And then also just continuing to identify where we can wrap our supports around school sites, teachers, and ultimately what's happening in the classroom, which ultimately impacts those test scores. And so I know you all have heard some things about our tutoring and our excitement having over 100 of our educators sign up to provide tutoring for our students in classrooms, and just really continuing to assess and monitor how that work is going, and then making adjustments over time. And so I think my other just little part that I'll add is just the reaction at looking at some of those points of growth for some of the subgroups at our middle level. I will say not only are learning acceleration specialists working with targeted groups of students at some of our middle schools that have the most need, but they're also pulling those conversations into cadres and into coaching sessions. So it's not isolated for individual students, but it's, how can I, take this work that we're seeing some early success on and scale it up so that it's a community conversation, and the practices that are we're seeing that are making a difference are being accessed by individuals, regardless if they have a learning acceleration specialist or not. So that would be my reaction to the presentation.
So in conclusion, overall, our growth remains, although there were some declines, it remains above 50%, with the exception of that tricky grade 6 at the moment. We still see patterns of differential growth by race across all the grade levels. And our overall response is to continue with our plan to implement the roadmap to educational equity, which includes, as Dr. Armstrong was unpacking, several strategies that are aimed at improving our teaching and learning. And with that, we are ready for questions and conversation. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Lowry.
Why hasn't the new math curriculum worked? I mean, I know you talked about that you mentioned it a little bit, but I was hoping that we'd see more growth in the MAPS data due to the implementation of the new math curriculum.
Yeah, so this is our first year at the middle level with mid-school math, right? So 7-12, the curriculum is new. And so oftentimes anytime there's something new, there's this thing called the implementation dip, right? And so I think research would suggest that we should assume that there's going to be a dip when using something new. And then I stand by that that we need to continue to create those conversations and those supports for teachers to not only dig into the curriculum and understand, but also their support in being able to unpack those units and the lessons and focus that on student and then review data to see how it's going. And so with math just starting this year, and I say 7 months in, I'm hopeful that the data will be different. Actually, I'm expecting the data to be vastly different next year.
It's just hard because it's like we want to make these changes for our students and we want to see immediate results, and to not see them is disappointing. And I think, what you say about what research shows about an implementation dip makes absolute sense. And yet I know that a lot of our students are already so far behind that dip is really painful to see.
I think what is a little reassuring was when we got our OSAS data, we did not see those declines in the elementary grades that were statewide, right? We bucked that entire trend across all of Oregon, and that can be contributed to the mathematics curriculum. The other thing about the mathematics, not the mathematics curriculum, but the Oregon State standards around math, is it's a different way of thinking about math, learning math and teaching math. And so it also requires our teachers to know and understand math in a slightly different way, right? And that's going to take us some time.
And to add to that is, I think I talked about the shift in our model, and we heard from site level principals saying that they want more control on for the professional learning of their teachers. They want to be able to support professional learning that's happening on their site. And they may have identified some needs that they want to unpack and go deeper in. And so our shift in that model to make sure that we're tailoring things to what principals need, professional learning and other learning activities, I think would be a response to that as well.
I think there's a desire to unwrap the cellophane and expect different results.
Miracles.
And it's we're glad to have standards-based new curriculum adoptions, and there typically is an implementation here, but in a second and third year, if there's fidelity of implementation, we should expect to see traction. And that curve kind of goes more steeply upwards. To say a little more on why the shift to ensuring there's capacity for instructional leadership is for the same reasons Dr. Armstrong just. In the same way we want to be really targeted of our interventions and supports with students, we want to make sure our principals have that ability to do that support their educators as well too, because it's a new way, and it's been a long time since they've had to do things differently. So we're confident that as they get more confident with it, our students will get more familiar with it each year. Start to see our outcomes, as you saw, they're hanging above that 50% in most cases, and we want to see more because we want to be on the right side of the bell
Closing
curve
the
if we're gonna, and at the same time, relative, yeah, we're doing better than others, and we think that's not good enough for us still, because we have board goals that are ambitious, and we want to meet those.
It's not good enough for our kids.
No,
Yeah.
I would also offer, I like to think about implementing a new curriculum like the first time you cook a new recipe.
I'm
Right?
great.
The
Yeah.
book's over here and the ingredients over here and you're running back and forth until you get to that point where you just know what to do
Right.
without thinking about looking at the recipe, you know how to make the little shifts in the seasoning and the ingredient amounts, right? This is what we're asking and watching teachers do with the curricular materials.
Director DePass, did you have a question?
I was curious. I was curious if students could opt out of taking those tests, and if there's a difference between, are we looking at kind of the same cohorts of kids year over year?
Great question.
And if people do have the ability to opt out, how is that skewing the data one way or the other?
Great question. So our stance is that our MAP interim assessment is part of our academic program and therefore cannot be opted out of.
Okay.
So this, we don't
So it's
see,
got some
we don't see,
fidelity.
yeah, we don't see the same thing that we see with our OSAS data where we
Okay.
often don't meet the participation thresholds that the state and federal government set up. It is a different group of students, right? But that's how we look at our OSAS data. This
Yes.
year's third graders compared to last year's third graders,
Yes.
this year's seventh graders compared to last year's seventh graders.
So
Thank
who,
you.
who are the students not taking it then? Because I mean, I know our rates are in the 80-90%, but if they don't opt out, where does that 10 to 20% come from?
So I think we have, yeah.
You mean on OSAS?
I think,
No, Matt.
no, Matt, I think there
Okay, just-
are a couple different factors at play. I want to think about the very challenging year the schools had last year with educator illness, student illness, absenteeism, sub coverage, and not having subs. And I think you couple that with pockets of adults who don't necessarily believe in standardized testing, and you get a participation rate that doesn't get
Okay.
to that 95%.
That's what I was
threshold.
wondering.
But even with maps?
It's in our appendices in slide
I had one more
26, I think,
question.
in terms of, yeah, go ahead.
And that was about, I think it was on slide 9. What was happening that was so remarkable in the reading between grade 6 for African American students and then grade 7? What was there an intervention or a measure that we could point to? And can we do more of that?
It's a big difference there.
It's a
And
big
actually,
difference, and
can
it
I,
just
can I add on to that question? Because
stood out to me.
I know I ask this every time, because we're measuring different cohorts, it seems to me you could have natural variability. So you could, that sixth grade
Yes.
class, I'm not saying they are, 10 and sixth grade parents, they could be challenging, in which case the seventh grade numbers next year would be lower, the eighth grade numbers next year would be lower. Or you could have something going on in those grades. And it
Right.
feels like unpacking that is the key question.
That's the trick in educational research, right?
Right.
Because unlike scientific research, we can't withhold treatment from students.
Right.
Right? We can't say,
Can't have
you weren't getting any
Yeah.
of this, and you were getting all of this, and then we'll see if it's
It works.
the thing that we're giving the students over here. So that unpacking becomes part of it, right? One of the things I'll be working with Dr. Armstrong's team on is really understanding the students that the learning acceleration specialists have been, the students with whom they've been working, and looking at their data over time to see if we see something that looks different than students that are like them that have not been served by the learning acceleration.
Is it helpful to compare so in 21-22 sixth grade, Black students were 43% growth. Those would be our 22-23 seventh graders, right? The sixth graders in 21-22
Yes.
would be
Yeah.
seventh graders in 22-23. So they're at 56 when they were at 43. And then the same if you look at Black seventh graders for 21-22, they were at 42. Black eighth graders are at 52. So there is a growth we can see with that cohort as they progress. So there is something happening in middle school reading at least that seems to be working.
Did you
I
have a-
had one quick
Go
question. One thing that I've always found really interesting when we do the deep dive is what you mentioned, the students that are in the red, that are in that lowest quartile, because those are the students most at risk of continuing to fall further behind. And so it would be interesting to see when you guys have gone more into the data, like, are we recovering more of those students out of that danger zone? They still might not be a benchmark, they might not be meeting 50% growth, but are we getting them out of that, 2 to 3 grade level behind type place?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that with some of the data we're pulling from the learning acceleration specialist work. So excited to report that out when the time is.
Yeah.
That's right.
I have kind of a multi-part question, but I think you're really good. On slide 21, you note that part of our strategy is to provide learning and coaching for teachers as requested. Is that as requested by principals, by teachers, by
teachers for their peers? Yeah. So if it is a teacher's choice to engage in peer coaching. Now, a principal may have a separate plan for a teacher as determined by maybe like their evaluation or some observations, which are a little more formalized. What we're offering in teacher professional learning is not only support to new teachers, but coaching cycles and conversations to support teachers with the new curriculum and other things as it may be, right? Maybe a teacher has some questions on, classroom management, or maybe even understanding mid-school math and want some strategies, then they can receive coaching from their peers. And so the thought is that if you knew that you were being coached by a peer, then those conversations are confidential, they're personalized, and teachers would lean into that because the fear of being open with their practice leading to, let's say, evaluations that aren't favorable, if you will. So that's one of the reasons why we look to promote the mentoring and coaching that's available and offer it as a resource so that teachers can feel comfortable leaning in and getting feedback from other peers, other teacher peers.
So it sort of leads to then my second piece, which is what's the feedback loop with this data to specific schools and teachers in classrooms? I imagine, but I don't know. I mean, if I'm a teacher and now we have this map data, do I get that in a very sort of formalized way that says, here's how the kids in your classroom did this year, and either, wow, they've done really, really well, or, ooh, there's some challenges here. Is there a feedback loop there that's formal with every one of our teachers in schools?
So teachers, yes, teachers have access to the data immediately if they want it from the map system, which is quicker than I can even access it, if we're being honest. We also include those data on the teacher dashboard, and I know that as I've done some visits in elementary schools, I've seen teachers with their map report sort of out in their classroom, right? So that's a piece of information, right? Map tells you something's right or something's wrong, but it doesn't tell you what to do. And so what's important in the follow-up is helping teachers and administrators understand what curricular-based activities and shifts need to happen based on whether things look pretty good with your map results or whether it looks like there's some concern. The other thing that I know happens is Dr. Franco included the growth data by grade level and school. He does a weekly newsletter to all of his principals and vice principals and assistant principals, and he included that. And that generated a lot of conversation and questions. I know I got some emails about it. People asking.
So he showed everyone.
Everybody.
But not by classroom, but by grade level.
Yes.
And people were mad.
No. I don't want to say people were mad. I just said I got some questions about it, and some conversation was generated.
Okay. Where do we
not
find that? Where do we see that?
I can share that with you.
I would like to
can
see
share that
that,
with the board, yes.
So the objective really is to build professional learning communities in our schools. So, it's not unusual to visit a principal and see that they have broken down the data with their grade level teams and their instructional leadership team They have all the focal students posted it out. They're targeting the acceleration teachers, or the high dosage tutoring is going to students who are not on par or grade level. So those are the conversations that should be happening, even separate from the individualized coaching an educator may be participating in, that there is a transparent conversation going on amongst the educators around where are we getting traction with our students, who's meeting those targets, and what do we need to do differently to lend another degree of support for students that are not meeting the mark. So that is exactly the kind of work that our school principals need to be leading in our schools, which they're having.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what's important when you say, they do have access if they want it. We should be seeing, I think this, when we're talking about the accountability piece, like what are those expectations we're setting at the principal level and then all the way down to the teacher level, that this is something you should be doing. And that's going to lead to my third question, which on the strategies, I noticed, you talk about reviewing the curriculum usage and professional learning opportunities. We talked about the coaching a little bit. I didn't see the specific words here around teacher engagement, right? I see student engagement, but not teacher engagement. And I continue to think that's a huge issue right now. And of course, I'm coming off a National School Boards Conference, over the weekend, where we heard a lot about this. But that question of what are we doing to engage our teachers, continuously, right? So that it's not sort of, here's a new curriculum and good luck with it, and your math scores aren't good, but like, what are we doing? It's not us. What are the principals doing, right, in those schools? What are their bosses doing to be engaging them so that they're getting them excited about the new curriculum. They're getting excited they're looking at successes in their school and they're saying, hey, look, we saw some successes in 3rd grade and 5th grade, and that's great. We saw some challenging areas in 2nd and 4th grade. Let's talk about those, right? And I feel like, I don't know what our teacher engagement scores are, but nationally they're really bad right now. But one of our strategies to improve student learning has to be to get those teacher engagement scores up as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the ways that we are measuring engagement is through attendance at the cadre that happens once or twice a month, and it's a 90-minute professional learning session where teachers are able to come together by subject area and have conversations around whether it's the curriculum, newly adopted curriculum, or whatever goals and objectives they have based on their subject area. And in some spaces we're seeing that the attendance is really strong, and then in other grade bands and other sites it is not strong, to be honest. And so we partner with OSP, and we talked about what it would look like to build support plans for principals and to hear from them about the resources they need. And as you can imagine, sites are in different areas are overwhelmed by some of the trauma that they're experiencing at their site, some of the behaviors, and we're continuing to lean into that conversation. Like we want to be a support in that, and we want to make sure that the curriculum that the community has invested in, that the board and the superintendent has led towards, is being used, and like I said, with fidelity. And so one of the shifts, like I said before, getting our centrally supported instructional coaches down to buildings is to help with that conversation. What we're hearing from principals, like, what do you need? How can we support? And one of the things was some local control over professional learning and being able to design that. So I would say that's one of the shifts that we believe principals believe will increase engagement. And then I think it's just continuing to make sure that we're collecting feedback. I will tell you, for those who do attend our cadres and professional learning events, we're at over 80% in favorable responses in terms of quality. And so, we know that what we're doing is useful and high quality, as indicated by the survey, but we also know we need 100% of the people there too. So we believe some of the moves that we're making now will set us up in the fall for increased engagement, which of course then impacts the way that students are performing in the classroom.
Okay, and one of the speakers at NSBA said that simply talking about teacher engagement increases engagement scores by 2%. So literally nothing else, just saying it, which is why I think it might be important for it to show up on slides like this. Just calling it out is something we think is important.
Yeah.
Actually helps. So
Absolutely.
Way to
I'm
take
gonna-
your conference learning and
apply it right
the
away.
next day.
I want to keep going through board members. You have anything quick?
I had one quick question. So I know it's very sensitive when we get down to classroom by classroom data, but when you guys are looking at it, do you see some real exemplars? Like where there are particular classrooms where those kids just took off?
Yes, and we're seeing that that's correlated with the attendance and the professional learning and the use of the curriculum that's adopted. It's correlated.
So how do we get more of that going on?
Yeah, that's
Right.
the question. And to be transparent to the board, I don't think I'm talking out of turn here, but we want to be solid in having a high degree of fidelity to our curriculum adoptions. They're not just important investments. We know that the accompanying professional development, when attended, is having a good add value. And so, it makes us question, are we at a place where we're ready to roll in another curriculum on top of that? Or do we pause a little bit until we do have a closer to 100% and then introduce another material? What we don't want is not have full fidelity, throw another curriculum on top of that,
Right.
and then be solid.
Yes. I have two questions. First of which should be pretty easy. It is just I don't understand what you mean by growth. Is it just the student's score on the test? I just didn't.
That's a great question. So it is based on all the millions of students who take the test. If I'm in 5th grade with a score of like 150, my score is expected to grow by a certain number of points when I take the test again in the winter. And if my score improves by that number of points or more, then I've met that growth target.
Okay. That makes sense. And then my second question is, I believe, yes, slide 21 about student engagement says intensive tutoring. What does that look like? What does the implementation of that look like for students?
Yeah, so right now, that looks like high dosage tutoring that's happening at some of our sites, and the teachers who there was a call out for teachers to sign up, and so it's using our teachers to provide tutoring to students in some core subject areas, and we're seeing some positive results with that as well.
And does that look like if they're falling behind in math, they'll get pulled out of math class and have high intensity tutoring, or just like a after school type of deal?
Yeah, after school or built in to, we have win blocks for some of our sites, which is what everyone needs, I think, is the acronym, or what I need, or one of those, but basically what students need. And so any opportunity to intervene during the day is what we look to do, but in the absence of that, it's after school.
Okay. What we know, Parker, is if I take the superintendent out of core math instruction to try to tutor him in math, he's going to fall further and further behind because he's missing that effective first instruction. So we have to be creative, and schools have to be creative in where and when that tutoring happens, so the students don't miss that first instructional opportunity with the grade level material and content.
Yes, I remember
Out
that.
of our classics.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say, just to add to that, there was an article, I don't know if you all had a chance to see it. I mean, I would probably omit their 2 F words with finally and few. But aside from that, it was a positive article, and we received a nod from a scholar who's well known in high dosage tutoring, and the remarks that Portland is one of very few places that's actually doing it right, using our teachers. And so Again, just omitting a
Yeah.
couple of words, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Director Tears Brim Edwards or Owens?
So I just basic elementary questions. I want to go back to the very beginning when you were framing it up, just because it's not here and because it's not printed in that piece of paper because I'm very a visual learner. Share again what you said about the 50%. Because you could look in here and look, I think if you look at the deck without any context, you might come to different conclusions. So can you just, you had like 2 sentences about what the 50% means.
Sure.
That's important.
So MAP is a norm reference test, so it wants, by nature, for 50% of the students to meet and exceed their growth, and 50% of the students not to meet it. Our work and our goal is for more than 50% of the students to meet the growth, because then you're actually shifting the shape of the curve in a positive direction, and more students are making up ground. When student growth is consistently below 50%, that means on average, we have more students falling behind because they aren't meeting their growth targets for a year of growth for a year of instruction. And that's what we don't want.
And our expectations in alignment with our board goals is to make up lost ground.
Yes.
So to beat growth expectations routinely so that we close our gaps.
So my other follow-up question is, again, just thinking about this as a layperson, we have our board goals like downstairs, all up on the wall and everything. And this is growth. So people like, sorting through proficiency and growth. And what, if anything, would you say to people that these growth, the data about growth, how it connects to proficiency?
Well, I would remind folk that we know we have students who are behind. We know they need to meet and exceed their growth targets multiple times over multiple years before they're going to be proficient. It depends on how far away you are from the finish line of proficiency, right? If you're really close, then it could be you meet your growth target and you're there. If you're really far away, you've got to meet multiple growth targets before you're going to be at proficiency. And that's why we really talk about both achievement and growth, because in my opinion, adding the examination of growth allows a teacher or a principal to feel a level of satisfaction in terms of students actually making progress, even though they didn't quite get to proficiency. Where proficiency is a sort of a zero-sum game. You either make it or you don't. And that can feel very demoralizing because you could, you could take a student from, a first grade level in math to a third grade level in math, from a first grade, you could take a fourth grader from a first grade level in math to a third grade level in math over 2 years, but that's not going to show up on OSAS just yet until he, she, or they get to that fourth grade level. And so that's why I think adding growth is a important part of the conversation. My overall ideal state is we have such a rich and robust implementation of our resources with appropriate scaffolds and training so that we don't worry about any test result, right? Because rich teaching and learning is happening. We can tell by the curriculum-based measures that students are growing, and MAP and OSAS just sort of take care of themselves because students are well prepared.
Let's live in that.
I'm trying.
And we always talk about teacher efficacy. We want folks to recognize that when they implement targeted strategies, or we put in place certain supports, like the acceleration that we need to show for some of our students, that those efforts are paying off, right? And that we need to do more of them and spread those. So we want to be mindful of sort of recognizing that effort optimism, that growth mindset as well.
Do you think that teachers looking at the growth data, if there was growth, had that feeling that I'm making progress even though student may not yet be proficient yet?
I couldn't say.
Are we telling people good job if they're moving students in making significant growth even though they're not yet proficient?
I believe that's happening at the principal level with teachers, yes.
And that's one of the things that we're really excited about with the shift in this model. I sound like a commercial and I don't mean to, but we're just really excited about it. We'll also have the opportunity to do some coordination of the PLC conversations that's happening at the local level. And so we think of the cadre experience where they're receiving instruction and having the opportunity to learn and try, different concepts or strategies. And then in their PLCs, they're able to then look at data, look at how students look at student work, and be able to pull out some of their assumptions, have conversations with their colleagues to determine if there's some shifts that they need to make. And I think that there's going to be so much power in those PLC conversations and that's professional learning community, which is a structure that brings together a group of educators with some commonalities, whether it's grade level or subject. And I think that that's going to help us move some things forward.
My last question is the students, and I won't use the F word, who got the intensive tutoring. Are we looking at them to see, just as a separate data set, to see whether, like, what type of growth they're making versus students who don't have access to that yet, so that we're able to sort of measure the effectiveness of that
Yes.
intensive tutoring?
Yes, that will be something that we review and monitor. I think my only slight pause and hesitation in saying that is that that's not available right now, as this work and the recruitment of teachers began in the fall, and so they've only been in the work for a few months now, and so but it will definitely be something that we monitor and review, but just we don't have anything to report out now. And I think even if we did, I don't know if the intervention has been in long enough to really pull quality data.
Like thank you, and that makes sense. I'm just thinking of like future budget years and making the resource allocation to want to make sure that intuitively it sounds like it's the right strategy to support students, but it would be great to have the data to show that it does, especially since it's expensive and it's time intensive and everything else, but to be able to have the data of here once we have meaningful data that we know that we're investing in the right strategy.
Yes, we do plan on providing that along with the learning acceleration data, the classrooms and the students that benefited from that intervention, data on their particular growth and proficiency level too as well.
I mean, that's the question we all want to know, right? That we're monitoring for, because if it pays dividends, then we know we have a tool belt that we can apply in school communities and students. We really need to see that more than a year's worth of growth. So we're hopeful, we're optimistic. So far, the early indicators are that it is having an impact. So we think it's going to be the investment we've made.
Well, it's also a very important specific piece of information in our advocacy agenda with the legislature, because we haven't had the opportunity to try these kind of demonstration projects before. And so once those state extra funds and ESSER funds go away, if we can say these are the results that we realized from high dosage tutoring or our summer programming or whatever, do we really want to say that we can't do that for our kids when we see what a difference it makes?
Right, and barring new revenues, we'll be able to make strategic trade-offs around things that do get us results versus those that are more nominal.
Right. But not art supplies. Crayons.
Gary, any questions? Nope. Additional questions from the board or discussion? Thank you. Presentation.
Appreciate
Still a lot
you
of work
guys.
to do.
Appreciate you very much.
Appreciate the conversation. I think with that, we're adjourned, right, Roseanne? Oh, wait.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait.
What's the award?
Our award.
Sorry. So, while we're officially here, I just wanted to present the Magnet Award to Portland City Schools. I was able to pick this up from NSBA on Sunday down in Orlando. This was for our work on climate policy. So it was the Silver Award in terms of innovation around. So it was exciting. And there were people from OSBA and some other Oregon delegation that cheered me on as I picked it up.
So on a related note, tomorrow morning, we're unveiling the first of our electric buses.
Yeah,
So, one step forward in our work in this area.
I just want to appreciate the board and particularly our policy committee chair at the time for the climate crisis response policy because really catapulted our ability to think differently about climate and environmental sustainability.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Yes, and just one last thing, if I didn't get to give a little more of a description, Agent Travel, who I think most of you had a chance to work with, has written a book on his student outcomes governance framework, given his work across member districts of the council. So you have a copy fresh off the press.
AJ Crable is like a marriage counselor for local school governance.
Fair.
Doesn't get no better than that.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.